Elias nodded, his eyes fixed on the journal in her hands. That journal, if I'm not mistaken, belonged to Alaric Thorne himself. And I believe it tells a different story. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and comforting. Yes, Mr. Sterling, I will. For my family, and for yours, for the truth. Liliana took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and old money filling her nostrils. She wasn't here by choice. Her grandmother, her only living relative, needed an expensive, life-saving surgery. Every avenue Liliana had explored led to dead ends, until a cryptic ad for a live-in maid at Sterling Manor, offering an exorbitant salary, appeared. It was a lifeline, albeit one tethered to a man rumored to possess no warmth. A ghost of a smile, genuine and heartfelt, touched Elias's lips. Call me Elias, Liliana, and welcome to the real work. She pushed open the heavy gate, its groan echoing her apprehension. The drive, lined with ancient gnarled oaks, stretched endlessly towards the imposing Gothic mansion. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress. The truth was out, at least between them, but the fight for public vindication, and the confrontation with the architect of this decades-long deception, was just beginning. The walls of Sterling Manor, once a symbol of Elias's isolation, were now becoming the crucible where two intertwined destinies would forge a new, formidable alliance. Inside, the silence was almost palpable, broken only by the soft click of her sensible shoes on the polished marble floors. A stern-faced woman, Mrs. Albright, the head housekeeper, greeted her. Her eyes, sharp and judgmental, swept over Liliana, lingering on her simple attire and the faint tremor in her hands. The alliance between Elias and Liliana was unlike anything either of them had ever experienced. Elias, the solitary CEO, now had a confidant, a partner who saw beyond his wealth and reputation. Liliana, the struggling maid, found herself thrust into a world of high-stakes investigation, armed with a purpose far grander than she had ever imagined. "You must be Miss Thorne," Mrs. Albright stated, her voice as crisp and starched as her uniform. "Welcome to Sterling Manor. Understand this, Miss Thorne. Mr. Sterling values efficiency, discretion, and silence above all else. This is not a social club. You are here to work. Any deviation from the rules will result in immediate dismissal." Their days became a delicate dance. During working hours, Liliana maintained her role as the maid, meticulously performing her duties, all while subtly observing Mrs. Albright and discreetly searching for clues in forgotten corners of the manor. After hours, the study transformed into their command center. Elias, utilizing his vast resources, brought in forensic experts, historical researchers, and legal minds, all sworn to secrecy, to meticulously re-examine old Sterling Group records, land deeds, and historical archives. Liliana nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, Mrs. Albright, I understand." Liliana's meticulous nature, honed by years of unnoticed detail, proved invaluable. She found hidden compartments in old furniture, deciphered faded annotations in ledgers, and pieced together fragments of information that Elias's experts might have overlooked. Her grandmother, though frail, also provided fragmented memories, names, locations, and whispers of a long-lost journal belonging to Alaric Thorne's brother, a key witness who had disappeared. "Good. Your duties are extensive. We maintain the highest standards. You will start with the West Wing. And remember," Mrs. Albright's voice dropped, "Mr. Sterling prefers not to be disturbed. His study is off limits unless explicitly instructed. Do you comprehend?" The Thorne family was renowned for their intricate accounting methods, Liliana explained one evening, pointing to a peculiar entry in an old Sterling Group balance sheet. "This looks like a legitimate expenditure, but it's deliberately obfuscated. It could hide a transfer of funds." "Yes, Mrs. Albright," Liliana repeated, her shoulders slumping under the weight of the unspoken warning. Elias leaned closer, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was constantly amazed by her sharp intellect, a stark contrast to the superficiality of the women he typically encountered in his world. He found himself drawn to her quiet strength, her unwavering integrity. His shyness around her persisted, but it was now laced with a deep respect and a growing, undeniable affection. He would sometimes find himself simply watching her, mesmerized by the way she moved, the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way her hair caught the light. For days, Liliana worked tirelessly, scrubbing, polishing, dusting, her movements silent, almost ghost-like. The manor was immense, a labyrinth of opulent room, grand halls, and forgotten corners. She rarely saw anyone other than Mrs. Albright and a handful of other silent staff. Elias Sterling remained an unseen, formidable presence, a myth whispered about in hushed tones. Their investigation pointed increasingly to Elias's great-great-grandfather, the Sterling patriarch who had originally accused Alaric Thorne, but the precise mechanism of the betrayal, the how, remained a puzzle, and Mrs. Albright's involvement was still shrouded in mystery. Why was she so desperate to keep the truth buried? One afternoon, as she was meticulously polishing an antique grandfather clock in a dimly lit hallway, a faint sound echoed from behind a heavy oak door. The study, Mrs. Albright had warned her. A crash, followed by a frustrated sigh. Curiosity, a dangerous trait in this house, pricked at her. She knew she shouldn't, but the sound was too human, too vulnerable for the detached billionaire. One evening, as they were sifting through ancient blueprints of the manor, Liliana noticed something odd, a discrepancy in the layout of the old servants' quarters, specifically a small room near the original vault. "This room," she murmured, tracing a finger across the faded paper. "It doesn't appear in the newer renovations. It's like it was erased." Hesitantly, she approached the door, her heart thumping. The sound of something heavy dragging across the floor, then a muffled grunt. Concern, not just curiosity, nudged her forward. What if he was hurt? She knew nothing of the man, but she couldn't simply ignore a potential crisis. Elias looked at the blueprint, then at the corresponding area on the manor's current layout. "You're right. It's walled off now, used as a storage closet." She knocked softly. No answer. She knocked again, a little louder. Still, nothing. Fearing the worst, she slowly pushed the door open. Just a crack. But why? Liliana mused. And why was it so close to the old family vault, where all the original financial records were kept? The study was vast, dimly lit by a single desk lamp, overflowing with books and towering shelves. Papers were scattered across an antique desk, and a large, ornate globe lay toppled on its side. And there, kneeling awkwardly on the floor, attempting to right the massive globe, was Elias Sterling. A chilling thought sparked in Elias's mind. My great-great-grandfather was known for his paranoia, his obsession with security. What if he hid something there? Something incriminating. He was even more imposing in person than in the rare, grainy photographs she'd seen. Tall, with broad shoulders encased in a crisp white shirt, his dark hair was slightly disheveled, falling across a sculpted forehead. His face, usually a mask of cold indifference in the media, was now flushed with exertion, a faint frown etched between his dark, intelligent eyes. They decided to investigate the walled-off room. Under the guise of renovation assessments, Elias arranged for a discreet team to open the wall. Mrs. Albright, sensing their intent, became agitated, shadowing their every move, her eyes darting between Elias and Liliana, a flicker of fear and desperation in their depths. He looked up, startled by the sound of the door. His eyes, the color of stormy midnight, locked onto hers. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Liliana froze, caught in his piercing gaze, her polishing cloth still clutched in her hand. She expected fury, a sharp reprimand for daring to intrude. When the wall was finally breached, they found a small, dusty chamber. Inside, nestled behind a loose brick, was a heavy, rusted metal box. Elias carefully opened it. Instead, a strange transformation occurred. The frown on his face softened, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly. A faint blush crept up his neck, dusting his cheekbones. His usually rigid posture seemed to falter, his shoulders hunching slightly. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, but no words came out. He simply stared, his gaze fixed on her, no longer intimidating, but unnervingly shy. Inside lay a collection of faded documents, personal letters, and a small, intricately carved wooden box. As Elias opened the wooden box, a collective gasp escaped their lips. Liliana felt a peculiar mix of confusion and a strange warmth spreading through her chest. The cold billionaire CEO, the Ice King, was blushing, and he was speechless, caught in the act of struggling with a globe. The absurdity of the moment was almost comical. It contained a pristine, signed confession, not from Alaric Thorne, but from Elias's great-great-grandfather, confessing to framing Alaric Thorne. The confession detailed how the sterling patriarch, driven by greed and a desperate need to expand his nascent empire, had meticulously forged documents, manipulated accounts, and bribed officials to falsely accuse Alaric Thorne of embezzlement. He had then used the subsequent legal proceedings to seize the Thorne family's considerable assets, which included vast tracts of land that would later become prime real estate for Sterling Group, and, most crucially, a revolutionary new energy patent developed by Alaric Thorne himself, the very patent that was now the foundation of Elias's current sustainable energy initiatives. The confession ended with a chilling instruction. This truth must never see the light of day. For the Sterling name to prosper, the Thorne name must forever remain in infamy. Mr. Sterling, Liliana stammered, breaking the silence, her own cheeks flushing. Are you? All right, I heard a noise. I apologize for the intrusion. Liliana felt a wave of dizzying emotions. Shock, vindication, profound sadness for her ancestors. The truth, buried for generations, was finally unearthed. He quickly looked away, his gaze darting to the overturned globe, then back to her, then to the floor. He cleared his throat, a deep rumble. Yes, fine, just the globe. It's heavy. His voice was low, a little rough, and utterly unlike the commanding tones she'd heard in snippets from news reports. He still wouldn't meet her eyes directly, his gaze flickering nervously. But there was more. Tucked beneath the confession was a small, beautifully preserved locket. It was identical to the one Elias had sent her, the one with A.S. engraved on the back. It was clearly an heirloom, a part of the Thorne family's history, and with it, a small, faded photograph. Liliana, recovering her composure, stepped fully into the room. May I help you with that, sir? The photograph showed a young woman, strikingly beautiful, with Liliana's auburn hair and green eyes, holding the locket, and beside her, a younger, much softer version of Mrs. Albright. The wrought iron gates of Sterling Manor loomed like skeletal sentinels against the overcast sky, casting a long, intimidating shadow over Liliana Thorne. She clutched her worn suitcase, the damp wind whipping strands of auburn hair across her face. This was it, her last hope. A maid's position in the notorious home of Elias Sterling, the billionaire CEO whose reputation for ruthlessness was as vast as his empire. He was known as the Ice King, a man who had built his fortune on cutting-edge technology and a chillingly detached demeanor, rarely seen in public, and never, ever, smiling. Liliana gasped. Mrs. Albright. She knew. She was there. He glanced at her, then the globe, then back at her, a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher in his eyes. Embarrassment, perhaps, or something akin to awe. No, I can manage. His voice was softer now, almost a mumble. Elias's face was grim. This confirms it. She was more than just a loyal servant. She was a direct witness. Or perhaps something more. He looked at the photograph, then at the locket in his hand, then at Liliana. The locket was a Thorne family heirloom, passed down for generations, now found in his family's secret hiding place, a symbol of their stolen legacy. And he had, unknowingly, given her its twin. He attempted to lift the globe again, his face reddening as he struggled. Liliana, despite her initial shock, couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. This fearsome man was surprisingly vulnerable in this moment. Without a word, she moved forward, gripping the base of the heavy globe. With a combined effort, they managed to right it. Their hands brushed, and a jolt, warm and unexpected, shot through Liliana. Elias flinched, pulling his hand away quickly, as if burned. The very next day, a distressed Mrs. Albright cornered Liliana in the kitchen. Her usual stern demeanor had cracked, revealing a deep-seated fear. You found it, didn't you? The box, the truth. Her voice was hoarse. Thank you, he mumbled, not looking at her. He stood up, his towering presence suddenly making the room feel small. He adjusted his shirt, his movements jerky, uncharacteristic. Liliana nodded, holding her gaze. Yes, Mrs. Albright. We know everything. Your involvement. Why you protected the lie. You're welcome, sir, Liliana replied, feeling the awkwardness thick in the air. Is there anything else, Mr. Sterling? Mrs. Albright broke down, tears streaming down her withered cheeks. It wasn't my choice. Miss Thorne, I was just a young maid, new to the manor. I saw everything. The forgery, the betrayal, Mr. Sterling's great-great-grandfather. He threatened my family. He forced me to sign a false affidavit to corroborate his lies. He promised me wealth and protection if I stayed silent and served the Sterling family with unquestioning loyalty. He promised to take care of my ailing sister, who was desperate for medicine. I had no choice. He shook his head, still avoiding her gaze. No. You may go. Miss Thorne. His voice was barely above a whisper. She sobbed, clutching her apron. I've lived with the guilt for decades. Miss Thorne, every day, seeing your family's name dragged through the mud, knowing the truth. And then your surname, Thorne. You came here. It was a cruel twist of fate. I saw your innocence, your kindness, and it brought all the shame back. I wanted to tell you, but I was terrified. The Sterlings. They hold power. My sister. Her descendants still depend on the legacy Mr. Sterling's great-great-grandfather promised me. Liliana nodded, turning to leave, a million questions swirling in her mind. The cold billionaire CEO, known for his unshakable composure, had been reduced to a blushing, stuttering mess in front of her. Why? As she closed the study door, she couldn't help but wonder if the legendary Ice King had a secret vulnerability, one he had just accidentally revealed to his new maid. And what, she wondered, would that mean for them both? Eleanor felt a pang of sympathy. Mrs. Albright, too, had been a victim of the past, forced into complicity. What about the locket? The encounter in the study rattled Liliana more than she cared to admit. The image of Elias Sterling, flustered and blushing, played on a loop in her mind. It was a stark contrast to the formidable figure painted by the media. She found herself subconsciously looking for him, listening for his footsteps, a strange anticipation stirring within her. Mrs. Albright looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. That was my mother's, Miss Thorne, a gift from Alaric Thorne's brother. He gave her 2 identical lockets, one for her, one for his wife, as a symbol of their secret resistance, their hope that the truth would one day emerge. They both believed in Alaric's innocence. She pulled a small, identical locket from beneath her uniform, hidden on a chain around her neck. My mother passed it down to me, a silent reminder of the truth. I knew you were a Thorne by your surname, but when I saw that locket in the box, I knew you were the one destined to finally reveal the truth. Elias, it seemed, was equally affected. His daily routine, once as predictable as the ticking of the grandfather clock she'd been polishing, became erratic. He would sometimes appear in the hallways she was cleaning, ostensibly heading somewhere, but his eyes would dart towards her, then quickly away. He'd clear his throat, adjust his tie, or suddenly become engrossed in a painting on the wall. Anything to avoid direct eye contact. The confession from the box, Mrs. Albright's story, the identical lockets. The puzzle was complete. The final piece clicked into place. The true villain was not a living person, but a historical injustice, perpetuated by fear and greed, and maintained by coercion. One morning, Liliana was cleaning the grand staircase, a precarious task. She reached for a high railing, stretching, when her foot slipped on a loose rug. She cried out, bracing herself for impact. A strong arm suddenly shot out, gripping her waist, steadying her. Elias had listened from the doorway, having followed Mrs. Albright. He walked in, his face etched with a complex mix of anger, understanding, and profound sorrow. You've lived with this for 50 years. Mrs. Albright, he asked, his voice quiet. She looked up, startled, into the dark, intense eyes of Elias Sterling. He was close, too close. She could feel the warmth of his hand through her uniform, the faint scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely his, a clean, almost sterile aroma, like fresh paper and quiet power. She nodded, tears flowing freely. Every single day, Mr. Sterling. It was a heavy burden. His eyes, usually so cold, were wide, a flicker of alarm in their depths. "Are you all right, Miss Thorne?" His voice was deeper than usual, a low rumble that vibrated through her. He extended a hand to her, a gesture of unexpected kindness. "No more. The truth will be known, and your part in maintaining the lie, however coerced, will be brought to light. But so will your role in finally revealing it. You have suffered enough." Liliana felt a blush creep up her neck. Yes, Mr. Sterling. Thank you. You saved me." The burden of generations had finally been lifted, but the greatest challenge still lay ahead, exposing the truth to the world and facing the repercussions of a legacy built on deceit. The cold billionaire CEO, no longer shy, stood united with his maid, ready to dismantle the carefully constructed lies of the past and forge a new, honest future. Together, he pulled his hand away abruptly, as if the touch had scalded him. His cheeks, she noticed, were once again tinged with a faint pink. He took a hasty step back, putting a safe distance between them. No problem. Just be more careful," he stammered, then turned on his heel and strode away, his usually measured pace quickening to something almost like a retreat. The plan to expose the truth was meticulously crafted, leveraging Elias's formidable resources and Liliana's intimate knowledge of the emotional impact of the Thorne family's plight. They decided against a public press conference initially, opting instead for a private yet impactful unveiling to the key stakeholders of Sterling Group, the board of directors, influential shareholders, and most importantly, the descendants of both the original Sterling and Thorne families. Elias extended a personal invitation to Liliana's grandmother, assuring her of safe and comfortable transport. Liliana watched him go, a small smile touching her lips. The cold billionaire CEO was turning shy around her. It was perplexing, intriguing, and oddly endearing. The setting was the grand ballroom of Sterling Manor, usually reserved for lavish galas, now stripped bare of its usual decorations, revealing a stark, almost solemn atmosphere. A large screen was set up, and the meticulously gathered evidence lay on a central table. Meanwhile, Mrs. Albright remained a constant, chilling presence. Her stares were more frequent, her criticisms sharper, her tone laced with an almost personal animosity towards Liliana. "Dust here, Miss Thorne. Did you miss this sloppy work?" "Not the standard Mr. Sterling expects." Elias stood before them, his presence commanding, yet with a new, quiet authority that transcended his usual Ice King persona. Liliana stood beside him, her head held high, a picture of quiet dignity. The board members, usually stoic and unreadable, exchanged puzzled glances. Mrs. Albright, pale but resolute, sat in the front row, a silent testament to her complicity and her newfound courage. Liliana's grandmother, frail but sharp-eyed, sat next to her, a flicker of hope in her gaze. Liliana noticed Mrs. Albright seemed to watch her, not just supervise. She'd find Mrs. Albright lurking around corners, or suddenly appearing behind her, making her jump. It was unsettling. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elias began, his voice resonating through the hushed room, "for generations, the Sterling name has stood for integrity, innovation, and unparalleled success. But today, I stand before you to reveal a truth that has been buried for over a century, a truth that taints our very foundation and demands immediate rectification." One afternoon, Liliana was assigned to clean the vast, rarely used library. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light filtering through the tall windows. As she worked, she noticed a collection of old, leather-bound journals tucked away on a forgotten shelf. They bore the faded inscription, "Thorne Family History." He then proceeded to lay out the evidence, the original forged documents, side by side with the meticulous forensic analysis proving their fabrication, the manipulated financial ledgers, cross-referenced with newly discovered, legitimate ones, that showed Alaric Thorne's innocence. He presented historical correspondence, letters exchanged between his great-great-grandfather and various figures, hinting at coercion and conspiracy. Her heart skipped a beat. Thorne, her own surname. She knew her family had a long, albeit disgraced, history, but she hadn't expected to find anything about them here, in the Sterling family library. Driven by a desperate need for answers about her lineage and the scandal that had tainted her family for generations, She carefully pulled one out. The board members shifted uneasily. Whispers rippled through the room. The first few pages spoke of a powerful, respected family, prominent in the city's early days, involved in the founding of Sterling Group itself. But then the tone shifted. Entries became frantic, detailing accusations of embezzlement, betrayal, and a spectacular fall from Grace, a prominent Thorne ancestor. Disgraced. His assets seized, his name dragged through the mud. The very scandal that had shadowed Liliana's family for decades. The last entry was chilling. The Sterling family, once allies, now stand as our betrayers. Their greed knows no bounds. The truth will be buried, but not forgotten. Liliana's blood ran cold. The Sterling family, the very family Elias belonged to. Was this why Mrs. Albright seemed to dislike her? Did she know about her surname's dark connection to the manor? The initial intrigue about Elias's shyness was now overshadowed by a chilling suspicion. As she absorbed the shocking revelations, a shadow fell over the page. She looked up, startled. Mrs. Albright stood in the doorway, her face a mask of fury. Her eyes, usually cold, now blazed with a fierce, almost predatory gleam. "This document," Elias stated, his voice ringing with a powerful conviction, "signed by my own ancestor, proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Alaric Thorne was not an embezzler, but a victim. He was framed, his name systematically destroyed, his family's assets seized, and his revolutionary energy patent stolen, all to consolidate the Sterling family's power and wealth. What do you think you're doing? Miss Thorne?" Mrs. Albright's voice was a low, dangerous growl. "These are private family archives. You have no right to touch them." She strode towards Liliana, her movements swift and menacing. A murmur of shock swept through the room. Liliana instinctively clutched the journal to her chest. I was just cleaning. Mrs. Albright, I saw my surname and I was curious. And," Elias continued, his gaze sweeping over the faces, "there was a witness. A young maid, coerced into silence, threatened with harm to her family if she spoke. A witness who has carried this burden of guilt for 50 years, and who, with remarkable courage, has finally chosen to reveal her truth." He gestured to Mrs. Albright. "Curiosity kills, Miss Thorne, especially here." Mrs. Albright hissed, reaching out to snatch the journal. "You know nothing. You understand nothing. And you will forget everything you just saw." There was a strange urgency in her voice, a desperation that went beyond mere adherence to rules. Mrs. Albright, trembling, rose to her feet. Her voice, though shaky, was clear as she recounted her mother's story, and then her own, detailing the threats, the coercion, and the weight of the secret she had kept for so long. She presented her locket, its twin to the one found in the hidden chamber, a symbol of the enduring truth. Before Mrs. Albright could grab the book, a new voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the tension. "Mrs. Albright, what is going on here?" The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps, exclamations, and furious whispers. Some board members were outraged, others deeply ashamed. The Thorne descendants, present in the room, were visibly emotional, tears streaming down their faces as the truth of their ancestors' innocence finally came to light. Liliana's grandmother gripped her hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears of relief and vindication. Elias Sterling stood in the doorway, his eyes dark, his face unreadable. He had clearly heard the commotion. His gaze swept from Mrs. Albright's enraged face to Liliana's frightened one, then to the journal still clutched in her hands. A flicker of recognition, a subtle tightening of his jaw. He recognized the book. "This is an affront," one elderly board member exclaimed, his face purple with indignation, a smear on the Sterling name. Mrs. Albright stiffened, her posture instantly reverting to her usual rigid professionalism. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Thorne was found perusing private family documents. Sir, a clear violation of the rules. I was simply correcting her." Her voice was smooth, but her eyes, as they darted to Elias, held a flicker of something almost like fear. Elias's gaze hardened. "The smear, sir, is the lie we have perpetuated for generations. The truth, however painful, is the only path to true integrity." He then looked at Liliana, a profound tenderness in his eyes that was no longer shy, but fiercely protective and deeply loving. It was Liliana Thorne, an unwitting descendant of Alaric Thorne, who first discovered the anomaly. Her intuition, her courage, and her relentless pursuit of justice led us to this day. Elias's gaze landed on Liliana, then the journal, then back to Mrs. Albright. He said nothing for a long moment, the silence thick with unspoken questions. Liliana braced herself, expecting the inevitable dismissal. He turned back to the audience. I stand before you, not as the Ice King, but as a man burdened by this historical injustice. As CEO of Sterling Group, I take full responsibility for the past actions of my ancestors. And I vow to right this wrong, publicly and decisively. Then Elias spoke, his voice cool and deliberate, yet with an undercurrent of steel. Mrs. Albright, I believe Miss Thorne was merely fulfilling her duties, exploring all aspects of the manor. And as for private documents, I believe a comprehensive inventory is long overdue in this library. Perhaps Miss Thorne could assist me with that, starting tomorrow. He announced a series of unprecedented measures. Mrs. Albright's eyes widened, a flash of pure shock crossing her face. But, sir, a public apology from Sterling Group to the Thorne family, acknowledging the historical injustice. That will be all. Mrs. Albright, Elias interjected, his voice leaving no room for argument. You may dismiss yourself. Full restitution, including financial compensation for all seized assets, calculated with historical appreciation, and a significant share of the profits derived from the stolen energy patent. Mrs. Albright, defeated, bowed stiffly and retreated, her footsteps unusually heavy. Elias turned to Liliana, his gaze softening as he took in her pale face and trembling hands. Are you all right, Miss Thorne? He asked, his voice unexpectedly gentle. He then nodded toward the journal. Perhaps you could bring that to my study tomorrow. We have much to discuss. The establishment of a Thorne Sterling Legacy Foundation, dedicated to funding sustainable energy research and supporting communities affected by corporate misconduct. With Liliana Thorne playing a pivotal role, Liliana nodded, still in shock. The Ice King had not only defended her, but had implicitly acknowledged the connection to her family, and invited her, the Maid, to discuss ancient Sterling family secrets in his private study. The chill of Sterling Manor had thawed, just a little, but the shadows of the past now loomed larger than ever. And Elias Sterling, the man who blushed in her presence, was clearly more than just a cold billionaire. He was a man with secrets, and perhaps a growing desire for the truth, a commitment to transparency and ethical governance, with a full independent audit of Sterling Group's historical practices. The air in Elias Sterling's study the next morning was thick with unspoken tension. Liliana clutched the leather-bound journal, its weight a physical manifestation of the secrets it held. Elias sat behind his grand desk, his usual impenetrable facade replaced by a rare gravity. He gestured to a chair opposite him. The board, faced with irrefutable evidence and Elias's unwavering resolve, had no choice but to concur. The decision was unanimous. The Sterling name would be publicly cleansed, not by bearing the truth, but by confronting it. Thank you for coming, Miss Thorne, he began, his voice calm, yet resonating with a quiet intensity. And for bringing the journal. I believe it's time we discussed its contents and the implications of your surname. News of the Sterling confession exploded across global media. The cold billionaire CEO, known for his ruthless pragmatism, had not only admitted to his family's darkest secret, but had publicly apologized and vowed to make amends. It was an unprecedented act, shaking the foundations of the corporate world. The Thorne family, once synonymous with disgrace, was now recognized as the victim of a historical injustice. Their name finally vindicated. Liliana nodded, taking a deep breath. I found it by accident, Mr. Sterling. I had no idea my family's history was intertwined with yours, especially not in such a way. In the midst of the chaos and media frenzy, Elias and Liliana found a quiet moment together in the now empty ballroom. Liliana's grandmother had been taken to a luxurious suite for rest, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Elias leaned forward, his gaze direct. The Thorne family was a prominent force in the city, a founding partner in what would become Sterling Group. My ancestors, the first Sterlings, and your ancestors, the original Thornes, were business partners and close friends. Until the scandal. You did it, Elias, Liliana said softly, looking at him, a profound admiration in her eyes. You exposed the truth. You broke the cycle. He paused, a flicker of pain crossing his features. The official story, the one propagated for generations, is that a Thorne ancestor, Alaric Thorne, embezzled vast sums from the nascent Sterling Group, betrayed my great-great-grandfather, and nearly bankrupted the company. He fled, leaving his family disgraced, and his name synonymous with treachery. The Sterlings, of course, were the innocent victims. He took her hands, his touch no longer hesitant, but firm and warm. We did it, Liliana. Together. I couldn't have done it without you. You showed me what true courage is. You thawed the ice. Liliana's blood ran cold. That's the story my family knows too. A deep, generational stain. We were taught to be ashamed of the Thorne name, but never understood the full extent. My grandmother still whispers about a great injustice. A frame-up. But she's too frail to recall the details. His gaze, no longer shy, was full of a deep, earnest love. My father taught me to be cold, to trust no one. He taught me that only power mattered. But you, Liliana, you taught me that truth matters. That kindness matters. That love matters. He hesitated for a moment. Then, with a confident, tender smile, he confessed, from the moment I saw you, struggling with that globe, I felt something I never had before. Something warm. Something that made me completely vulnerable. Something that made me shy. And I knew, then, that my life would never be the same. Then, the climax of his presentation. Elias projected the scanned image of his great-great-grandfather's signed confession onto the screen. The room gasped. The sheer audacity, the chilling detail of the century-old betrayal was laid bare. Liliana's heart swelled. The shy glances, the awkward moments, the subtle blushes. They weren't signs of weakness, but of a profound awakening in a man who had been taught to feel nothing. Liliana's hands trembled as she opened the journal to the last entry, the one that had chilled her to the bone. She read aloud, "The Sterling family, once allies, now stand as our betrayers. Their greed knows no bounds. The truth will be buried, but not forgotten." Elias, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I felt it too. The moment our hands touched on that globe, I felt a connection I never thought possible. You, the cold CEO, and me, the new maid. Elias took the journal from her, his fingers tracing the faded script. My family has always been fiercely protective of its legacy. Any mention of the Thorne betrayal was met with swift and harsh silencing. But there were always whispers, contradictory details that didn't quite fit the official narrative. My own father dismissed them as unfounded rumors. He died suddenly, a few years ago, leaving me with the entire weight of Sterling Group and all its unspoken secrets. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her. You're not just a maid, Liliana. You are the embodiment of everything good and true. You are my partner, my confidant, my inspiration. His voice dropped to a whisper, filled with a newfound tenderness. My love. He looked at her, his gaze intense. My father was a cold, distant man. He instilled in me the absolute necessity of ruthlessness, of unwavering control. He taught me that trust was a weakness. Perhaps it was because he knew the truth of our family's past. Perhaps he was trying to protect me, or perhaps to perpetuate the lie. He leaned in, and their lips met. A kiss that was both gentle and fierce, a culmination of shared struggles, painful truths, and an undeniable connection that transcended social divides and shattered centuries of lies. The cold billionaire CEO had fallen, not just for the new maid, but for the extraordinary woman who had dared to bring light into his darkest corners, and in doing so, had taught him how to truly live. And he was no longer shy around her, only deeply, profoundly, in love. Liliana felt a wave of empathy for the man across from her. He, too, was a victim of a pervasive family narrative, shaped by lies and suspicion. So, what do you think happened? The aftermath of the Sterling confession brought about a seismic shift, not just for the Sterling Group, but for Elias and Liliana personally. The world watched as Elias Sterling, once the epitome of corporate detachment, embraced a new era of ethical leadership. his every move scrutinized by an eager public. The Thorne Sterling Legacy Foundation became a beacon of hope, its initial projects focusing on sustainable energy solutions and providing legal aid to small businesses battling corporate injustice. Liliana, as a key member of the foundation's board, quickly proved her intellect and compassion, earning respect far beyond her initial role as a maid. "I think," Elias said, his voice low and deliberate, "that my ancestor, or perhaps a powerful figure close to him, betrayed your ancestor." The official story was crafted to cover it up, to solidify the Sterling family's reputation and wealth, while destroying the Thorne name, the land, the assets, the power. It all shifted to the Sterlings, and the lie has been carefully maintained for generations. Her grandmother, after receiving the best medical care courtesy of Elias, regained much of her strength. With the Thorne name finally cleared, she was able to share stories of their proud ancestry, filling in the gaps of Liliana's knowledge and healing old wounds. The weight of generations of shame had lifted, replaced by a quiet, dignified pride. "Mrs. Albright," Liliana interjected. "She was furious when I touched the journal. She practically pounced on me." Mrs. Albright, after her courageous testimony, retired from her role as head housekeeper. Elias, understanding her past coercion, ensured her and her sister's descendants were financially secure, and she became a trusted, albeit now independent, ally, offering quiet advice and support. Her stern exterior softened, revealing a gentle, regretful soul. Elias's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Albright has been with the Sterling family for over 50 years. She was my father's most trusted confidant, and before that, my grandfather's. She knows the secrets of this house, every last one of them. She serves this family with an almost fanatical loyalty, and she would protect its truth at all costs." Elias, once consumed by work and isolated by his perceived coldness, found balance. He still ran Sterling Group with formidable efficiency, but his decisions were now tempered with a profound sense of justice and empathy. His public image transformed from the Ice King to a visionary leader, willing to confront uncomfortable truths for the greater good. His shyness, once a barrier, had evolved into a quiet confidence around Liliana, allowing him to express a tenderness he'd never known. "So she knows the truth?" Liliana asked, her voice hushed. Their relationship, initially a partnership born of necessity, blossomed into a profound love. They navigated the glare of public attention with grace, their story of unexpected connection captivating the world. The media, fascinated by the romance between the billionaire CEO and the former maid, often painted them as a modern-day fairy tale. But for Elias and Liliana, it was far more than that. It was a love built on shared adversity, on the unearthing of painful truths, and on the courage to be vulnerable. "I believe so," Elias confirmed, or at the very least, she is complicit in maintaining the lie. She has been a constant presence in my life, subtly reinforcing the narrative of the cold, unfeeling CEO, of not trusting anyone. She has cultivated my solitude, my detachment, perhaps to ensure I never dug too deep into the past. Liliana moved into Sterling Manor, not as a maid, but as Elias's partner in life. The grand house, once a symbol of his isolation and her burden, transformed into a home. They filled its silent halls with laughter, shared meals, and quiet conversations that stretched late into the night. Elias, who once communicated solely through terse commands and formal statements, now spoke openly about his fears, his dreams, and the simple joys he discovered in everyday life with Liliana. Liliana felt a chilling realization. She groomed you to be the Ice King one evening as they walked through the manor's sprawling gardens, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Elias stopped by a freshly planted rosebush. It was a new addition, a symbol of growth and new beginnings. Elias nodded slowly, a profound sadness in his eyes. "Yeah, she did. And until you arrived, until you inadvertently stumbled upon that journal and then into my life, I never questioned it. I accepted my role, my nature, as a solitary existence driven only by ambition." He looked at her, a faint, almost shy smile touching his lips. "You, Miss Thorne, were the glitch in the machine." "You know," Elias began, his voice soft, "before you, this manor felt like a cage. My world felt cold, structured, predictable. I never thought I would experience genuine connection, let alone this. He gestured around the thriving garden, then to her, his eyes filled with warmth. You brought life back into this place, Liliana. You brought life back into me. Liliana felt her cheeks warm at his words, a stark contrast to the cold truths being unveiled. Liliana smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. And you, Elias, taught me that courage isn't just about fighting injustice outside, but within. You showed me that even the coldest exterior can hide the warmest heart. We need to find proof, Elias stated, his voice firm, regaining his usual composure. Irrefutable evidence that my ancestor, or someone acting on his behalf, framed yours. And we need to understand Mrs. Albright's role in all of this. Why is she so fiercely protective of this lie? He turned to face her, taking her hands in his eyes, once stormy and distant, were now clear and bright, reflecting the love he felt. Liliana Thorne, he said, his voice husky with emotion. I saw you first as a glitch, a disruption to my perfectly ordered, solitary life. But you were the most beautiful disruption I could have ever imagined. You taught me to feel, to trust, to love, and the shyness I felt around you, it wasn't fear, it was awe. But how, Liliana asked, if it's been buried for generations, what chance do we have? He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, a diamond, clear and brilliant, sparkled in the fading light. Will you do me the honor, Liliana, of transforming this house into our home, and my life into our shared adventure? Will you marry me? Elias's gaze hardened with a renewed resolve. Sterling Group has resources beyond your imagination. Miss Thorne, we have the best forensic accountants, private investigators, archivists, and now, he looked at her, his expression softening once more. We have you, your family's journals, your knowledge of your grandmother's whispers, your ability to see beyond the superficial. You are the key to unlocking this truth. Tears welled in Liliana's eyes. The girl who had arrived at Sterling Manor desperate for a job, haunted by a tarnished family name, now stood before the man who had helped her clear that name, and who had fallen in love with her against all odds. Their journey, born from a desperate need and an accidental glance, had led them here. You trust me? Liliana asked, surprised. Yes, Elias, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. 1,000 times. Yes, more than anyone I've ever known, he replied, his voice low and earnest. Perhaps it's irrational, given our circumstances. Perhaps it's this unfamiliar shyness I feel around you. But yes, Liliana, I trust you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, its brilliance matching the joy in their eyes. The cold billionaire CEO, once a prisoner of his past and his perceived nature, now stood completely transformed, his heart full, his shyness replaced by an open, loving devotion to the woman who had seen past his facade and loved him for who he truly was. And the new maid, Liliana Thorne, had not only found love and vindication, but had become the queen of a new, honest, and truly sterling empire. He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping before her. His presence was overwhelming, yet no longer intimidating. He extended a hand. Liliana Thorne, will you help me uncover the truth? Will you help me right a wrong that has plagued both our families for generations? Will you help me understand who I truly am, beyond the Ice King persona I've been forced to wear? Thanks for watching. If you were captivated by the story of a cold CEO's unexpected transformation, a maid's courageous quest for truth, and a love that defied all odds, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support truly helps us bring more gripping tales to life. Stay with us for our next unforgettable story. And while you're here, make sure to check out our other videos. There's always more drama and romance to explore. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Liliana looked at his outstretched hand, then into his deep, earnest eyes. The cold billionaire CEO, the man who blushed in her presence, was asking for her help, not as his maid, but as an equal, a partner in a quest for truth. Her grandmother's frail face, etched with a lifetime of unspoken injustice, flashed in her mind.